This is Ecclesiastes chapter 50 and verse 25. There be two manner of nations which my heart abhorreth, and the third is no nation. They that sit upon the mountain of Samaria, and they that dwell among the Philistines, and that foolish people that dwell in Shechem. I want to start off by giving all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shah, Bahashem, Rakah Quadash. Double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone, who are the elders of Yasha Allah, and a sincere salutation to all you Akim, who are preaching this word and believing this word, and to the Akwat, who are believing this word, and all truth and in sincerity. All right, now I'd like to go into a lesson based on the controversy of Deuteronomy, the 32nd chapter and the 21st verse. All right, so I want to read it, and then we're going to get precept upon precept, because contrary to the Christian narrative, this wasn't the Lord opening the door to the heathen nations. All right, let's continue. Let's read it and go into it. This is Deuteronomy 32 and 21. They have moved me to jealousy with that which is not God. They have provoked me to anger with their vanities, and I will move them to jealousy with those which are not a people. I will provoke them to anger with a foolish nation. So what do you see when you read that? First, you see foolish nation, and you see not a people. All right, now let's go back to the precept we started off with. There's Ecclesiastes 50 and 25. There be two manner of nations which my heart abhorreth, and the third is no nation. All right, the third is no nation. Listen to it. They that sit upon the mountain of Samaria, and they that dwell among the Philistines, and that foolish people that dwell in Shechem. All right, so in the eyes of the Lord, this isn't talking about actual natural heathens. All right, you have to remember the Lord gave our nation a bill of divorce. Not only that, a lot of people naively think that the Lord is following the same timeline that you're mentally following, meaning that the Lord doesn't know that we would fall off as a nation of people. We would stray away from the law, statutes, and commandments as a nation of people. The Lord knew that, which is why the Lord said, look, I'm going to provoke them to jealousy by that which is not a people. All right. And it's not talking about other nations of people. It's talking about the nation of Israel in a Gentile state of mind, because at that point, you're not a people. All right. Matter of fact, let's go here. All right. We're going to go to Hosea chapter 1. And let me get this in the blue letter so we can get the words. All right. So it's Hosea 1. And I want to jump down to get the context. We're going to start up a little bit. This is Hosea chapter 1 and verse 5. All right. And it says, and it shall come to pass at that day that I will break the bow of Israel in the valley of Jezreel. And she conceived again and bare a daughter and said unto him, call her name Lo-Ramah, for I will no more have mercy upon the house of Israel, but I will utterly take them away. All right, now let me start up some more. Salakia. All right, this Hosea 1. And we're going to start at 2. It says, the beginning of the word of the Lord by Hosea. And the Lord said to Hosea, go take unto thee a wife of whoredoms and children of whoredoms, for the land hath committed great whoredom, departing from the Lord. So he went and took Gomer, the daughter of Diblaim, which conceived and bare him a son. And the Lord said unto him, call his name Jezreel, for yet a while, and I will avenge the blood of Jezreel upon the house of Jehu, and will cause to cease the kingdom of the house of Israel. And it shall come to pass at that day that I will break the bow of Israel in the valley of Jezreel. And she conceived again and bare a daughter, and God said unto him, call her name Lo-Ramah, for I will no more have mercy upon the house of Israel, but I will utterly take them away. But I will have mercy upon the house of Judah, and will save them by the Lord their God, and will not save them by bow, nor by sword, nor by battle, by horses, nor by horsemen. Now when she had weaned Lo-Ramah, she conceived and bare a son. Then said God, call his name Lo-Ammi, for ye are not my people, and I will not be your God. Yet the number of the children of Israel shall be as the sand of the sea, which cannot be measured nor numbered. And it shall come to pass that in the place where it was said unto them, ye are not my people, there it shall be said unto them, ye are the sons of the living God. Now, there's a common thread throughout, from Deuteronomy to Hosea to Ecclesiasticus to everything that's happening in the New Testament. And that common thread is the Lord dismissing his people and then reuniting with his people according to prophecy. Nowhere in that is a specific promise that other nations will partake in the covenant that was promised to the house of Israel. All right. And this goes back to basic context of the scriptures. Just like we couldn't convert to another heathen's religion and escape the curses, no other nation can convert to being an Israelite and inherit the blessings. That makes no sense. Edomite can't say, oh, I believe in God, I'm converting. And now the Lord's prophecy about no survivors of the house of Edom is now confounded because one Edomite or two Edomites or three Edomites say, you know what, I convert to being a Hebrew Israelite. You're basically calling the Lord a liar. Now, again, proper context shows us that in the kingdom of heaven, the other nations are going to serve the Lord. And when I say serve, I mean they're going to keep the law, statutes, and commandments. That is the closest thing they're going to get to salvation. But as far as the laws being written in their inward parts, all right, the blessing that was promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, it was promised to that lineage and that house for a reason. That is family specific. Now, dealing with this verse in particular, it's not telling you, all right, Deuteronomy 28, Slakia. Let me go back to it. Deuteronomy 32 and 21. This is not saying that there's other nations of people that are going to be grafted in to a nation that they were never a part of. If that was the case, the curses would cleave to them too. But they don't. All right, now let's get this first. All right, let's go to not a people, right? Now, what does this say? Look, lo of me. All right. Lo, no, I'm going in a people. All right. Now let's go here. All right. This is no, Slakia. It says no people. Provoked to jealousy with no people. And then if we go to Hosea 1 and 10, or 1 and 9, Slakia. What do you see? It's the same thing. All right. Not my people. All right. So you got no people, which is lo me, Slakia, lo all right. And then lo yah, all right, is not my people. So it's the same common thread. It's not talking about other nations being grafted into the nation of Israel. And Christians try to use that, but ultimately you have to look at prophecy. And one of the key prophecies that you have to look at to confound this whole doctrine, to cut this whole doctrine, is the prophecy of no survivors in the house of Edom, no descendants of the house of Edom. That Edom found no place of repentance, though they sought it carefully with tears. You can't convert and now become another nation of people. So if the Lord said Edom found no place of repentance, you can't convert and become something different. Otherwise, you're calling the Lord a liar, man. All right, this is Obadiah 1 and 18. And I'm going to get this in the NLT. All right, and it reads, the people of Israel will be a raging fire, and Edom a field of dry stubble. The descendants of Joseph will be a flame roaring across the field, devouring everything. There will be no survivors in Edom. I, the Lord, have spoken. Now, again, I'm getting into this point to highlight something extremely important. The Lord has specific judgments for entire nations of people. And you can't convert and escape that judgment. Just like as a nation of people, we couldn't convert to the philosophies of Edom and escape the curses. Our people have tried to trim their ways to seek love. Yet them trying to follow the culture of the so-called white man has not given them the benefits of the so-called white man. They're still under the curses. This is why the Lord said, why trim your ways to seek love? And going back to the original point of the lesson, when the Lord is saying not a people, he's not saying that he's going to provoke his people to jealousy with other nations. And this is the controversy. You have to understand what happened to the nation of Israel prior to the New Testament. Between Malachi and Matthew, you had the Hellenization of Jews, of the Israelites. And you had a lot of Israelites who ran to the heathens for help. All right, let me get an example of that. All right, this is 1 Maccabees 2:42. Then came there unto him a company of Assyrians who were mighty men of Israel, even all such as were voluntarily devoted unto the law. Also all they that fled for persecution joined themselves unto them and were a stay unto them. So they joined their forces and smote sinful men in anger and wicked men in their wrath. But the rest fled to the heathen for succor, which is help. So during the time of the Maccabees weren't just going against the heathens. They were also putting to death wicked Israelites who had forsook the law. So much so that a lot of those Israelites ran to the heathens. And then you think about those men starting families at a certain point, even though they're Israelites, they're in a Gentile state of mind because their forefathers have forsook the law and moved amongst the heathens. So when you get to the New Testament and you see these so-called Gentiles that can receive salvation, if you don't understand the context, you'll easily believe that that's other nations being grafted in. But it's not. That's not the case. These are those same Israelites that fled to the heathen for succor, but now their descendants have repented. Now they're returning. And you had those Israelites who were still zealous for the law, who were still amongst the circumcision, who were keeping the law, who rejected those men, even though they were flesh and blood Israelites. That's the controversy. It's not opened up to everybody. That was the actual controversy that was happening in the New Testament. The rejection of Israelites who were in a Gentile state of mind and wanted to return. They were still able to attain mercy because it was promised to our forefathers, and it was promised not based on conditions. All right. Now I want to go here. I want to get this point. All right. This is Romans 11. And this is the famous grafting in of the olive tree. All right. Now let's go here. Let's get some of the context. This is Romans 11. And I'm going to jump down to verse 13. It says, "For I speak to you Gentiles, inasmuch as I am the apostle of the Gentiles, I magnify mine office. If by any means I may provoke to emulation them which are my flesh, and might save some of them. For if the casting away of them by the reconciling of the world, what shall the receiving of them be, but life from the dead? For if the first fruit be holy, the lump is also holy, and if the root be holy, so are the branches." Now, as I'm reading, think family tree. All right, think family tree, because this is what Paul is highlighting. Think family tree when you're reading this. Verse 17 reads, "And if some of the branches be broken off, and thou being a wild olive tree were grafted in among them, and with them partakest of the root and fatness of the olive tree, boast not against the branches. But if thou boast, thou bearest not the root, but the root thee. Thou wilt say then, the branches were broken off that I might be grafted in." Now, let me get some context. All right, we're dealing with the olive tree. Let's get some context. All right, this is Jeremiah 11:16. And it reads, "The Lord called thy name a green olive tree, fair and of goodly fruit, with the noise of a great multitude, with the noise of a great tumult, he hath kindled fire upon it, and the branches of it are broken. For the Lord of hosts that planted thee hath pronounced evil against thee, for the evil of the house of Israel and of the house of Judah, which they have done against themselves to provoke me to anger, and offering incense unto Baal." So when you fast forward to Romans 11, keep this in mind. Keep this context in mind. All right. And again, this is all going back to the chapter, Deuteronomy 32nd chapter in the 21st verse of the provoking of jealousy and understanding the context of what's being said there. All right. Continuing verse 19, it says, thou wilt say then, the branches were broken off that I might be grafted in. Well, because of unbelief, they were broken off. And thou standest by faith. Be not high-minded, but fear. For if God spared not the natural branches, take heed lest he also spare not thee. And people will see this and say, all right, you see, that's the natural Jews. No, this is going into the Israelites that were already keeping the customs. This is going into those Israelites who were already keeping the law, statutes, and commandments. This is why I said the olive tree and then the wild olive tree. Because what was the wild olive tree doing? Going into the parable of the prodigal son. They were out mingling with the heathens, spending their inheritance riotously, living like one of the heathens. This is why I said wild, but it still referred to it as an olive tree. It didn't say an olive tree against an orange tree. It's the same family. That's what you have to remember, context, based on context. And if you don't understand the context, anybody can beguile you with a handful of precepts when you don't have the understanding of the history and the context of the scriptures and what's being said. All right, now I want to continue at verse 24. It says, for if thou wert cut out of the olive tree, which is wild by nature, and were grafted contrary to nature into a good olive tree, how much more shall these, which be the natural branches, be grafted into their own olive tree? And what is this going into? It's saying, look, if the ones of the circumcision begin to understand this, of course, they're going to be even on a higher level as far as understanding. Like Paul was a perfect example of being of that good olive tree, of keeping the law, statutes, and commandments. But he had a more graduated understanding when Yahweh Shai supped with him. But the wild olive tree, going into the Israelites who were in a Gentile state of mind, who were coming back into their heritage, they didn't have that same understanding. They were still having to learn damn near from scratch. They knew they were Israelites, but they still had to learn. They had to crawl before they walked, so to speak. But this is all about the same family tree. And how do we know that? All right, let's continue. It says, for I would not, brethren, that ye should be ignorant of this mystery, lest ye should be wise in your own conceits, that blindness in part is happened to Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles be come in. And so all Israel shall be saved, as it is written. There shall come out of Zion the deliverer, and shall turn away ungodliness from Jacob. Now, this is the conclusion of the matter. He's going into the wild. He's going into the good olive tree. He's going into the branches that were broken off, the ones that were grafted back in. And then he's saying all Israel will be saved. Showing you that it's still dealing with the same family tree. You can't spiritually become an Israelite. If that were the case, anybody who cleaved to this, the curses would follow them too. But they don't have the stigma of being a so-called Negro, Latino, Native American, West Indian, and Haitian. They don't have to deal with the multiple captivities. We're not even talking about this one. It's still dealing with the same family tree. So when you see the provoking to jealousy, how were they being provoked to jealousy? By those Israelites who had journeyed, all right, who were still a part of that same heritage. All right. It never changed. All right. Real quick. I want to get this. Let's go to Acts 2 real quick. This is Acts chapter 2 and 5. And it reads, and there were dwelling at Jerusalem Jews, devout men out of every nation under heaven. All right. And this is what a lot of people don't understand. And this is why a lot of people are easily beguiled, because they don't understand the context. In their mind, the Israelites were always compact together. They were always amongst each other. In multiple captivities, they were all. No, you had Israelites that were out of the land for centuries, thousands of years. This is why you had the law of the stranger. An Israelite that didn't stay in the land, but they came to the land because you were required to come to the land 3 times a year for the feast days. But there were always Israelites outside of the land. And what did the Lord say? He has scattered us into the 4 corners of the earth, but he was going to gather us again. All right, it's Jeremiah 31:10. Hear the word of the Lord, O ye nations, and declare it in the isles afar off, and say, he that scattered Israel will gather him and keep him as a shepherd doth his flock. And that hasn't changed, man. All right, when you understand precept upon precept, there are more precepts that highlight that this isn't talking about heathens than there are to try to support the Lord grafting heathens into the legacy and the inheritance of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. All right, let's get another example. All right, this is Ezekiel 36:23. And I will sanctify my great name, which was profaned among the heathen, which ye have profaned in the midst of them. And the heathen shall know that I am the Lord, saith Yahweh by Shemel Shai, when I shall be sanctified in you before their eyes. For I will take you from among the heathen and gather you out of all countries and will bring you into your own land. And how did the Lord begin that process? It's Baruch chapter 5:5. Arise, O Jerusalem, and stand on high, and look about toward the east, and behold thy children gathered from the west unto the east by the word of the Holy One, rejoicing in the remembrance of Yahweh by Shemel Shai. And nothing's changed when you go into the New Testament. Nothing changed about that. So that no people wasn't talking about other nations of people. It was talking about these Israelites that were cast away, that were cast off, that were returning in repentance. All right. And I'm going to end it with this. All right. This is Ecclesiastes chapter 50. I'm going to touch this again. Ecclesiastes 50:25. There be 2 manner of nations which my heart abhorreth, and the third is no nation. They that sit upon the mountain of Samaria, and they that dwell among the Philistines, and that foolish people that dwell in Shechem. All right. And for context, let's just get Shechem. Get the Hebrew word and get the definition. All right. It's Shechem. All right. And it says Shechem, back or shoulder. All right. It says son of Hamor, the chieftain of Hivites at Shechem at the time of Jacob's arrival. B, here it is. A city in Manasseh, located in a valley between Mount Ebal and Mount Gerizim, 34 miles north of Jerusalem and 7 miles southeast of Samaria. All right. So this is going into Jake, that foolish people that dwell in Shechem. All right. So it's not talking about other nations of people when you deal with no nation or no people. All right. So Lord willing, this was edifying with that. I want to give all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rakah Quadash. Double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone, who are the elders of Yasher Allah, and a sincere salutation to all Yuakim, who are preaching this word and believing this word, and to the Akwath, who are believing this word in all truth and in sincerity. Shalom.